Our Western culture has held a lot of mythology around the honeymoon phase. And I've talked about it a few times on this podcast, but today I want to offer a new definition for what it means when the honeymoon phase is over that flips the whole idea on its head. If you're in a committed relationship and already dreading that moment, or maybe you feel like you're well past the honeymoon phase, if you want the wild connection that drew you to your person in the first place, the same feeling of aliveness inside your relationship, this episode is for you. I hope you'll stay with me. This is Reclaiming the Gentle Man. I'm Dave Lashansky. So let's start out with the context here for what the honeymoon phase even means. The honeymoon phase is when we're all lovey-dovey. No problems seem to come. You're having sex all the time and you feel this deep physical and emotional attraction to your partner. It's when everything inside your relationship feels good. It's when you're not weighed down by the baggage of having hurt each other or disappointed each other. You don't have the history to build the resentment. And when we buy into this model of a relationship, the old school model, it usually means that when the honeymoon phase is over, we think it means we're destined to become less attracted to our partner, less excited about intimacy, more annoyed by them more often. We're told that this honeymoon phase ending means that the relationship's excitement and newness is going to fade away, must fade away. And it's going to give way to a familiarity that makes you less attracted to or drawn to your partner and them to you also. It's what a lot of marriages fizzle into, and most of us actually have a lot of evidence for what that looks like in practice. Meaning we tend to validate this story about what relationships become, what inherently happens at the end of the honeymoon phase, based on what we see and witness from our parents and people around us. But here's what I want to share with you today, especially those of you in committed relationships, for whom maybe this idea of a honeymoon phase is really important, because it's nice when things feel good and new in a relationship. But what if you had more power over what your relationship feels like than you think you do? In other words, what if the end of the honeymoon phase weren't a transition into boredom and sexlessness, but instead an invitation into a more intimate and satisfying and generative season of your relationship? What if the end of the honeymoon phase is actually the beginning of the relationship that you've been looking for all along? A lot of men proclaim this desire for a constant freshness in their relationship, right? An ease to their partnership, this willingness they long for from their partner to be flexible. I hear it all the time in men's circles. People who are frustrated that their partners are so rigid and so needy. And for men that have been in a relationship for a long time, without that feeling of freshness and newness and ease that they're longing for, they tend to have a really strong desire to get that back. And oftentimes seek it out in some other way, whether it be through porn, relationships with coworkers, affairs, a constant longing for something else. But here's the message that I want you to sit with for this episode, because this is the way you get freshness, the way you get joy and sex and all the things you want after the honeymoon phase is over. The message is this: intimacy deepens when you let the struggle you're feeling in your relationship transform you. Your intimacy will deepen when you let the struggle transform you. That thing she's been asking you to do that feels like too much, like softening when you talk to her about work, saving time and energy for her at the end of the work week, like building a more expansive vision for your life and not settling for less than what she and you really want. These are all classic cases where men, and myself included here, tend to build up walls. We start to have an inner dialogue with ourselves about how it's easy for her to ask for it. She's not doing the work, and she's always this, or she's never that. And when you find yourself building the case against her in your head like that, that is the route to staleness in your relationship. And it has very little to do with the honeymoon phase being over. And the rest of your relationship is more like a sexless, unfulfilling companionship where you're mostly just glad you're not alone. But if we take the other route here of not letting that resentment fester inside of you, noticing every time that inner dialogue kicks in and address it and own it like it's your responsibility, actually do something about it, well, then we're in business. Because maybe you talk to your men's group about it, and maybe you talk to a coach or a therapist or a mentor or just a friend. Maybe you directly talk to her about whatever it is that's creating resentment inside of you. Maybe you just meditate on it. But whatever it is you do, when you decide to keep your relationship clean and free from resentment, that is one powerful way to keep your intimacy alive, to keep that honeymoon phase from being the best part of your relationship. And that is a powerful way to keep showing up when things are hard too, to let the struggle in your relationship grow you, transform you. And if you can do this, you will intensify your attraction in your love. You will not lose it when that initial period is over. But that's not always the case for everyone. And this is where I want to get into maybe the most important part of this episode. Because it's one thing when we're feeling resentment for our partner, and it's an entirely different thing when they're the ones resenting us. And this is a much harder path. But if you're on it now, I want you to know you still have more agency here than you think. Because what happens when you're in a relationship with someone who resents you is that really you have two options. The first one is to leave. This is a big one. It's not an easy choice, and I don't mean to be flippant about it. But if you're with someone who's treating you poorly, who doesn't respect you, who won't listen when you try to talk to them, leaving is an option on the table for you. But I wouldn't do it if I didn't try this other option first, which is to get humble and listen. One of the reasons so many relationships right now are just filled with animosity and resentment isn't because one partner is bad or toxic. No matter what you're reading on the internet about men or women and their problems, for the vast majority of us, it's not about one partner being a bad person. The reason so many relationships are filled with animosity and resentment is because at some point, your partner's anger is going to be directed at a part of you you don't want to look at. When that happens, you will defend your behavior and your choices and your problems without ever really considering what they're saying to you, without ever even attempting to look at it. For most men, this is going to happen when a part of us that we feel pride in, our strength, our intelligence. For a lot of men, it's how much we care about them, how much you care about your partner. When that gets threatened, when that happens, and we don't listen for long enough, and we don't stop and question whether the person we love is telling us that they don't feel loved, and instead just choose to believe that they're wrong, that's going to be a tough road. That's the end of the honeymoon phase for a lot of us. That is often the door closing on that period. And this is why I'm making this episode today. Because that is also the moment when you can decide to turn the end of that honeymoon into the deepest intimacy you've ever experienced. It's not that you're not going to make the mistake. It's not that you're not going to defend yourself when something inside of you that you feel maybe insecure about or maybe proud of is threatened. You're probably going to get defensive there. But there's an opportunity after that to come back, to own that, to say, you know what? I wasn't listening before. Help me understand what it is you need, what you're saying. Because it's not about the relationship needing to be new and fresh to keep you attracted. That's not how this works. Really, attraction and intimacy is about allowing yourself to be seen. And oftentimes, that takes humbling yourself enough to grow the parts of you that your love needs you to grow. Maybe it's to get better with money. Maybe it's to listen more and talk less, or to be more open and honest about your needs. When you can slow down enough to actually sit with your instinctual need to roll past that moment, right? To push beyond the thing she's asking, but you don't want to look at because it's uncomfortable, right? When you get good enough to sit in that discomfort long enough to see where she's coming from, to hear what she's asking, and that you actually have the power to do something about it, to act on that, that moment leads to a kind of connection that will surpass any honeymoon phase you have ever experienced in your life. Because that's the stuff of real connection, of real commitment. It's being seen in your wholeness, in your humanity, in your raw essence, which, by the way, no one is innately equipped to do. And that's the beauty of this message. Because while the honeymoon phase is a natural and real part of a relationship, what follows can be so much more than we imagined it to be. If you allow yourself to grow, to be fallible, to make the mistake of defending instead of listening, and then to show back up, to own that there are parts of you that are still unfinished. And there might be moments when you just don't have access to courage, but you can still choose and commit to building on that. That you can love by owning your responsibility to grow in a relationship. That's what commitment looks like if you choose it. It deepens and it grows. And when the honeymoon phase is over, it just gets better. That's the stuff of long-lasting love. And if you're waiting for the next shoe to drop, or you're finding yourself in a stale commitment, I want to challenge you to listen a little deeper, to question what it is you might be defending that's making it hard for you to show up more authentically, more vulnerably to your relationship, to grow it. It's not about coming to her with all your anxieties and feelings of unworthiness. It's about owning that you have them and doing something about it. Showing her that you care enough to do that too. That's the beginning. Thank you for listening to this episode of Reclaiming the Gentleman. If you're finding yourself stuck in your relationship or feeling like you don't know how to navigate out of a recurring problem or conflict, I believe that means that you are being called to learn something important. And I want to help you do that. The best and easiest way to start is to take my free 3-minute assessment. There's a link in the show notes to it, and it'll give you some tools to try out the next time your conflict spirals out of control. often seemingly out of nowhere. And if you are struggling and looking for help beyond that, though, reach out. Don't go it alone. You've got this if you do it with help, with community, with brothers, with coaches, with mentors. And links to everything to get in touch are in the show notes. Wherever you are, I'm wishing you a beautiful day or night. I'll be back in a week.